Back at school, the normal vibrant atmosphere of Crown Hills High School had turned green. The buzz of excitement and energy that once echoed through the hallway was replaced with whispers of fear and uncertainty. Grace, the once lively and brilliant student who had taken the school by storm, now lay unconscious in the hospital. The news spread like wildfire that something sinister had happened to Grace during lunch. Ikenna and Adiola, her two closest friends, sat anxiously in the hospital waiting room. Ikenna's leg bounced nervously as he tried to maintain his composure. Adiola, however, sat still, her face a mix of worry and fear. "I can't believe this is happening," Ikenna muttered, his voice cracking. "Grace? What did she do to deserve this? Who could have done this to her?" he asked. Adiola nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I feel like we failed her," she said. "How did you not see this coming?" she said softly, her voice barely audible and her hands trembling. Hello there, before we continue with this interesting story, please, if you're just coming across this story for the first time, kindly check the link in the description box to watch the previous episode so that you can be able to understand this story better. And please, kindly subscribe to this channel now, please, before we continue. Your subscription helps this little channel of mine to grow. Please help me subscribe to this channel. Thank you. And if you're a returning subscriber, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for coming back. I really appreciate your presence here. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now let's go back into our story. Grace's parents had been by her bedside since they arrived, their hearts heavy with fear and confusion. Her mother held her limp hands, praying silently. "God, please, she is the only treasure we have in this life. Please, Lord, hear her for us. Make her come around. Please, Lord," she prayed silently. As evening fell, the school principal arrived at the hospital along with some of the teachers and David, the youth corper. They had come back to check on Grace, but also to get answers to some questions from the doctor. Immediately her mother saw them, she held the principal and started crying. "Principal, what happened to the child that I left in your care? How could you allow this to happen in your school? I know how long we waited on the Lord before He gave us grace. What is all this? How could you people be so careless? What happened to my child?" she cried uncontrollably. Her husband immediately held her close and consoled her. "My darling, it's okay. Grace will come around. Let's trust God," he said. There was silence for a moment while Grace's mother continued sobbing. Then finally the principal spoke and said, "I am so sorry this happened. We take full responsibility for this. I know and I believe that Grace will come back to us healthy again. But be rest assured that we must investigate this. The school cannot let this go. We will get to the root of it and bring the culprit to book," he assured them. "Who could possibly want to harm Grace? She's a very sweet soul. Grace is very peaceful. She doesn't like trouble," Mr. Davis said, his voice filled with confusion. But as they all pondered on the question, one person in the room was quiet, and it was Adiola. She remained distant, her eyes glassy as though she was lost in thought. Something about her seemed off. The following Monday, the school launched an internal investigation. The principal called all the students and staff into the assembly hall to address them. "Students of Crown High," he began, his deep voice booming through the microphone, "we are facing a difficult time. One of our students' food was compromised last week. We take this matter very seriously, and I want you all to know that we will find out whoever that is responsible for this. Please do not panic. The relevant authorities are already on this case, and on our own part, we will do everything possible to fish out the person behind this. So be rest assured that you are all safe here, okay?" he assured them. The students were quiet, their faces pale. Whispers began to circulate the hall, and some students glanced nervously at one another. "Who do you think did this thing?" whispered one of the students. Ife, one of Bisi's friends, struggled nonchalantly, her eyes darting towards Adiola, who was sitting with Ikenna, and she said, "Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if it is someone that has a vendetta against her. She was always trying to outshine everyone, so it could be anyone. It could be just anyone. Nobody can tell," she said. Meanwhile, Grace's parents, along with the school staff, worked together to piece together the events of the day she collapsed. They spoke to the students and questioned anyone who may have seen something unusual. Adiola remained quiet throughout the questioning. When asked where she was during the lunch, she calmly replied that she had been with Grace and Ikenna when the whole thing turned out. Her answers were brief, but her calm demeanor seemed to put the teachers at ease. But Ikenna noticed something was wrong with Adiola. He had always been close to Grace, but Adiola was her best friend. Yes, something was off. There was a coldness in Adiola's eyes that he had never noticed before. As the investigation continued, more and more people began to suspect foul play from Grace's friends. I just don't understand, Ikenna said one evening as he and Adiola sat by Grace's hospital bed. Why would someone want to do this to her? He said. Adiola shifted uncontrollably. I don't know, maybe jealously. Grace was always, she was always better at everything. Maybe someone just got tired of her, she said. Ikenna glanced at her in confusion. What are you saying, Adiola? But Adiola quickly changed the subject, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her school uniform. Nothing, just forget about it, she said. Days passed and Grace remained in a coma. The atmosphere at Crown High School was so thick with tension. Students whispered in hallways, rumors spread like wildfire, and everyone was at the edge. The principal had called in the police to help with the investigation, but no one has any lead. Also, Grace's parents hired private investigators, yet no one had an answer. Adiola's behavior became more erratic. She started distancing herself from Ikenna, claiming that she needed more space. Ikenna noticed the shift in her mood, but whenever he asked her what was wrong, she would simply brush him off. One afternoon, Ikenna couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off, so he decided to confront Adiola during break. Adiola, he began as they sat in the school garden. You have been acting weird lately. What is going on? He asked. Adiola looked up to his face, her eyes flashing with anger. What are you trying to say, Ikenna? You think I had something to do with what happened to Grace? She asked angrily. I didn't say that though. Please don't quote me wrong. Ikenna quickly defended himself. But I don't know. Something feels wrong. You have been so distant lately. You barely visit Grace anymore. And every time I bring up this investigation, you simply change the topic immediately. Is there something I need to know? He asked. Adiola's face twisted with emotion, a mixture of fear and guilt. Ikenna, just drop it. You don't know what you are talking about. Do you know how it feels for your best friend to be lying unconscious in the hospital for weeks? She asked angrily. But before Ikenna could respond, Adiola stormed off, leaving him standing in the garden, confused and concerned. After some weeks, the investigation was stalled as there was no lead anywhere. Everyone's concern now was for Grace to come up from coma and get better. One afternoon, as Ikenna sat beside Grace's bed, watching her chest rise and fall with each shallow breath, he made a decision. He couldn't just ignore his suspicion anymore, so he decided to investigate more. I am going to find out the truth, Grace, he whispered to her. I assure you I will do it, he said. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Ikenna began retracing the events leading up to Grace's collapse. He interviewed so many students, camera footages were reviewed, yet no one had seen anything unusual. As Ikenna pieced together the information, he realized that the only person who had been constantly by Grace's side before the incident was Adiola. It was then that a chilly thought crossed his mind. Could Adiola, her best friend, have something to do with this? He asked himself. Determined to find out, Ikenna confronted Adiola one afternoon during break. Adiola, he said, his voice cold and firm. I know you have been hiding something. It is time for you to tell the truth. He confronted her. Adiola's face went pale and her hands trembled as she tried to form a response. I don't know what you are talking about, she said. But Ikenna wasn't backing down. You were the last person with Grace before that incident. You have been acting so strange ever since. Just tell me the truth, he said. Tears filled Adiola's eyes and finally she broke down. It was wasn't supposed to be like this, she cried. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. What did you do, Adiola? Ikenna demanded, his heart pounding in his chest. I compromised the food, Adiola confessed, her voice shaking with guilt. But I didn't mean to hurt her like this. I was just jealous. Everyone loves Grace. She was always the best at everything. I was tired of being in her shadows, she cried. The confession hit Ikenna like a punch to the gut. He stared at Adiola in disbelief, unable to comprehend what he had just heard. "How could you do this? She was your best friend, for Christ's sake," he asked, his voice filled with rage. Adiola wiped her tears, her face still filled with regret. "I made a terrible mistake. I didn't want this. I just wanted her to know what it feels like not to be perfect for once," she said. Ikenna shook his head in disgust. "You need to tell the police, Adiola. You can't run away from this," he said. And with that, the dark secret behind Grace's predicament was finally revealed. The news spread like wildfire. No one could believe it. Adiola, the quiet, sweet girl who had been Grace's closest friend, was behind her predicament. When asked why she had to do it, Adiola broke down in tears. I didn't mean to hurt her," she sobbed. "I just couldn't withstand being in the shadow anymore. Everybody loves Grace. Her beauty, her intelligence, her charm. Even Mr. David paid more attention to her than anyone else. I felt invisible." Adiola cried. Adiola revealed that Bisi's suspension had pushed her over the edge. Bisi's friend had convinced her that Grace was the reason for all their troubles. One of them had given Adiola the substance, and in a moment of weakness, she had compromised Grace's lunch with it. The school was thrown into chaos. Adiola was expelled, and her accomplice was arrested. Grace eventually woke up from her coma, but the betrayal by her best friend left an emotional scar that would take time to heal. Weeks later, Grace's father applied for transfer back to their former city, citing his daughter's safety. His request was granted, and days later, Grace and her parents moved back to the place which had always shown her love. Her old friends welcomed her back warmly. She continued to keep in touch with Ikenna and Mr. David. As Grace sat down in the school garden one afternoon, she felt nothing but pure joy and peace in her new environment. Moral lesson from this story. This story teaches us the danger of envy and how unchecked jealousy can lead to destructive actions. It also highlights the importance of integrity and the power of friendship as seen in Ikenna's loyalty. It also warns us to be very careful of those we call friends. What other lessons did you learn from this story? Please write it in the comment section because I would love to learn from you also. I hope you enjoyed the story, and if you did, kindly subscribe to this channel. Please support this my little channel's growth by subscribing, and please don't forget to put on your bell notification icon so that you'll be the first to know once I post a new story on this channel. Please like and share this video, and until our next story, bye bye and God bless you. Please subscribe before leaving. Thank you so much.